Been mining gold for more than 130 years, if not close to 150 years. And at some point it does come to an end. South Africa's mining talent is significant. And where we are at the moment is that we've actually exported it. There are many other options available around the world where people can invest their money. Today, the Minister of DMRE quoted that about 60 billion rand is being extracted illegally.
Wow, 60 billion.
As a result of illegal mining. And making sure that everyone who goes, who works in the mine goes back home.
Yeah.
That's the vision.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, where we explore South African politics through interviews and analysis. And today's conversation, brought to you by Brand South Africa, is one I'm extremely excited and interested about. We're speaking to the CEO of the Minerals Council of South Africa, Mzila Mthenjane. This is crucial because minerals have and will continue to play a core role in South Africa's economy, and there's no one better to unpack that with us than you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
It's a great pleasure. I suppose the first thing that a lot of people are thinking about when mines come to mind is the Stilfontein situation. How do you reflect on that? I know you played a role as the council in the rescue efforts, and what do you think Stilfontein represents for the sector?
I think it was a sad event, not for the sector only, but I think for the country. But what was important, I think, given the actions that were taken, firstly by government to rescue the miners, the illegal miners who were there, was to ensure that the manner in which the operation is conducted is one that would be done in a way that is safe for those who are actually conducting the rescue mission, as well as extracting people from underground. It's important to understand the context in terms of, the situation as far as, what kind of, setting was there. So we're dealing with an operation that was more than 1,000 meters below ground, so just over a kilometer. It's an operation that had been not been operated on for a while, and the means of access was not through what we call an equipped shaft, which had cages and lifts and the infrastructure to take people. So the manner in which people entered is also one that is unknown.
I see.
And so the number of people who were in underground, was also not unknown. But when we provided this technical assistance, it was important that we establish some base information in terms of how many people could we take out, what condition were they in. And the technical service was provided by Mine Rescue Services, which was created by the mining industry. And they were very successful at extracting as many people as were found, and unfortunately including people who were deceased.
And how did your role come about?
Well, it was really exactly as I've described it. As a mining industry, we created Mine Rescue Services, which consists of highly skilled individuals trained in working under extreme conditions of different nature. So, for instance, when there's an underground fire, it can be a very dangerous situation, heat, smoke. But these are people who are trained in terms of how to be able to navigate those situations, know which areas to enter, know which areas not to enter in order to rescue people. So it's a technical service that the industry created for emergency situations, and that's the role that we played as an industry and the Minerals Council.
Yeah. I can see you've been involved in the sector for a long time, because I haven't heard such an interesting, just to get my head around why this was different, like the depth of the mine, the fact that it hadn't been used before, all of that adds a lot of color to our understanding, because as members of the public, we're just like, they're people trapped in a mine somewhere. Were you surprised by the scale of the operation at this mine?
Certainly we were, and I mean, there's no knowing, how big the scale is, the presence of it. And I think the work of law enforcement had to come to bear. And but I think at the end of the day, the manner in which SAPS and DMRE and several other government agencies work together, as well as the contribution that we could make, given the humanitarian crisis that was unfolding in front of us, was absolutely critical.
And are you satisfied with the way the rescue mission happened, and that all has been done to balance the different interests of making sure that the law is enforced, but also making sure that life is protected?
I think as far as the removal and the means with which it was done, we're very happy with that. I think the work and the contribution of the mine rescue services was world class in terms of what they've done.
How did you get interested in mining and the sector, the industry?
So the way that I describe it is when I was looking at careers that were available, it was one that I came across and described as jack of all trades, master of none. The mining engineering field is really about, as a mining leader, how do you get the best and the most out of people to be able to achieve both personal and professional and organizational goals. And what I mean by that is the role of a mine is to extract minerals from underground at a reasonable cost in a way that is safe, and to create value for stakeholders. That involves a lot of people. So there's a lot of planning that is required. Some of the inputs in terms of planning that are required is you need a geologist to be able to go and do the drilling and define the ore body. You need engineers who will provide you with the technical means of being able to access that ore body underground, to be able to drill a shaft, tunnels. You need machines to be able to do that. You need environmental scientists to be able to tell you from an environmental condition where people will be working. What are the most appropriate engineering techniques you need to put in there to ensure cool, clean air for breathing. How do you get water? Logistics is a very important thing. And then the measurement of the work that you are doing whilst you're mining. All of this needs leadership and management towards the organizational goal of creating value for stakeholders. And so that's where the expression, jack of all trades, master of none comes in. And so it's really been an exciting career for me and very fulfilling. So when I matriculated and I'll give up my age, in 1987 I went to university at Wits. And if I can, put in an ad for them, one of the top mining schools in the world.
By all means.
And what I did though then is I started with a pre-university bursary program, which was offered, interestingly, by mining companies. It used to be called, we used to call it pubs, and they offered this program both for engineering and commerce across several universities in the country. And really it was a bridging program. And the reason I did a bridging program is that I was very scared of university.
Right.
But it really built my confidence because it was a program that was conducted on a university campus.
Okay.
So the environment was already, a university environment. And some of the subjects were also university, but there were other programs that helped me, such as, public speaking programs. Those are always helpful later on in life in terms of speaking. I think sitting here and being able to conduct this interview without my nerves taking over me is a function of all of that training, and obviously over time also enhance that with other training. And then after that bridging program, then did a 4-year degree with through the university, and then started working in the gold mines in Carltonville. And fortunately also through a bursary from Anglo-American Gold and Uranium Division, which has since transformed into what we now know as Anglo Gold Ashanti. And enjoyed the time in mining, but I also had a huge interest in understanding the finances on the side of
Sure.
mining and the commercial side of mining. And this is how I then transitioned into investment banking.
Interesting.
I spent about 6 years in investment banking.
Yeah.
But the mining bug never left me. And so it was also a way of moving up the ranks in mining, in the mining industry.
Yeah.
And so also got to work at senior levels with companies like Goldfields. I think one of the best places that I worked at was Royal Bafokeng Holdings. And a highlight of that career was where we created a company which has since been absorbed by another big company. We created Royal Bafokeng Platinum.
Wow, so you were part of that?
I was part of that, which was listed on the JSE in 2010 in November. And worked in the role of executive for business sustainability for about 3 years. And this was after 3 years as a portfolio manager with Royal Bafokeng Holdings. And then after 6 years, I joined Exara, and I was with Exara for about 10 years until I left in August of 2023.
Now, it's nice for our viewers to get some inspiration about, what's possible at the highest levels of the corporate world of South Africa. And what was it like when you ascended to this important role within the industry? CEO of the Minerals Council, formerly Chamber of Mines, is kind of like you're like the head boy of mining.
That's right. No, it was exciting. It was a new role. It was upward mobility, promotion. My previous role at Exara was executive head for stakeholder affairs, with reporting to the CEO, and so this was certainly a promotion. And not necessarily the boss of mining bosses. Let's just dismiss that.
Okay. Sure, yeah, fair enough.
But certainly very, very good relationships, between myself and the various CEOs of mining companies. And I think what was also exciting was that I guess I was moving into a level where I had a much higher oversight of the mining industry across different commodities.
Yeah.
And secondly, we'll be engaging now at a national level in terms of stakeholders, particularly when it comes to government.
Yeah.
And so it was really, and there was a need for me to just sit back and reflect in terms of what are the possibilities, what are the opportunities for impact that one can make as a professional in this industry, as a CEO of the Minerals Council, given the scale of the industry and its fit in the economy.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
particularly at a time when, we need economic growth. We see huge opportunities for the mining industry to make an impact in terms of stimulating the economy of the country. So that was the excitement that really attracted me to the role.
And as we talk about the country and its economy, do you think we are seizing the potential of the mining industry, or are we squandering it? Because it gives us such an advantage over many other countries that don't have our mineral wealth. But on the other hand, it feels as if maybe in the last 15 years or so, we haven't really galvanized the industry or the sector's potential for developmental impact in the country at large. What are your thoughts on that?
So my predecessor has always said that we need to get to a point where we maximize the potential of the mining industry.
Sure.
These are words that Roger Baxter often repeated. And he came up with a payoff line, making mining matter, #making mining matter. And I think it's a very important question that you ask, especially when you look at it over the past 15 to 20 years. Where we've missed a couple of significant opportunities. The economic boom in China, which provided huge opportunities for South Africa to maximize its mineral potential.
Absolutely.
And so when I came on board, I kind of felt like we've done enough work making mining matter. It really needs to be a more assertive statement about mining matters, and this is why. And so this is where our journey is now, that it's no longer about the effort of trying to make mining matter. It's about making people understand why mining matters. And it's really at an opportune time as well, when we're having conversations about critical minerals.
Yeah, absolutely.
At a time when the world needs to transition from fossil fuel-based energy to more diversified energy and more from renewables.
Yeah.
We can talk about the energy mix at some other point, but the important thing and the important message, particularly for South Africa, is that we need a mix of energies. We're very strong on coal. We need to maximize that to its fullest potential, but continue to invest significantly in renewables, and also look at nuclear, and look at this portfolio of energies that will make the economy and economic growth going forward sustainable, because it needs to have that energy security. And so coming back to maximizing the potential for mining. This is really where we're putting in the most effort as a Minerals Council, to give the evidence to the statement that mining matters. We're sitting in Joburg today, the city of gold. This is what gold has delivered. But we've been mining gold for more than 130 years, if not close to 150 years. And at some point, it does come to an end. And we have some of the deepest mines in the world, up to close to 4 kilometers underground.
Okay, wow.
So the technology to be able to operate at those depths is present in South Africa. South Africa's gold mining industry, South Africa's coal mining industry has actually developed a lot of global skills across the whole value chain of mining, from geology in terms of finding resources in the ground. There's a concept called kriging, which is about how do you prove up the value of the resource that you've found. That's a South African invention, which is now global in its application. In terms of mining methods, in terms of processing, there's a process in gold called carbon in pulp, which was invented in South Africa, which actually unlocked a lot of gold mining deposits, not only in South Africa, but globally. So South Africa's mining talent is significant. And where we are at the moment is that we've actually exported it throughout the world. And so we need to invite it back by looking at this point in time in applying it to the exploration of critical minerals, but also to the exploration of all other minerals that we have in the ground in South Africa.
How did we miss those opportunities? Because, I would have thought China's commodity demand could have also set South Africa economically free if we captured that moment. And I think of this in the context that these critical minerals that many people speak about and rare earth elements could be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really set up our country and even the region. But if we don't seize it, then we will end up being, on behind the 8 ball again, or missing that opportunity, or getting the crumbs and not the food of that opportunity.
So if there's one thing that the audience should take away about mining and how we think of mining, is that it's a very important catalyst, economically speaking. And why we refer to it as a catalyst is that mining, when you start mining, you're likely to come to an end at some point for different reasons. And the first one is around the fact that you exhaust the resource. And the second one could be that, market conditions are such that it's no longer viable. But the most important thing is what you do with the revenues that you generate over that time. And that period can be anywhere from 5, 10, 15. The longer it is, the better. Because you continue to generate those revenues. And so when it comes to why did we miss those opportunities? And any investment is conducted on the basis of confidence. And you would have heard, for instance, when talking about Operation Vulindlela 2.0, this is one of the things we need to focus on. How do we as a country build confidence and shift the sentiments towards potential investors into South Africa? And it applies to mining or any investment opportunity. And that confidence and sentiment starts with the kind of legislative environment that you provide. We're preparing for a mining Indaba session, which I have proposed that we call it What Miners Want. A play on the movie What Women Want and What Men Want. But you don't need to be electrocuted with a hairdryer to understand that. and a legislative environment that is market friendly is absolutely critical to ensuring that investors have the confidence that the law that's in place is one that actually is attracting investment. The law that is in place is not one that will change over time and actually be more stringent and more restrictive, because the amount of capital that is required to be invested in starting a mine is significant. And no one wants to lose that amount of money without getting a return, or you lose that amount of money because it's just been taken away from you. And so there was a significant amount of confidence lost, I think, with the introduction and largely the uncertainty around the MPRDA and the mining charter. Investors don't have a concern with, issues of community investment or employment equity.
Sure.
But it can't be that for a period of time you have a value of X related to, let's say, ownership. And then after 5 years, you have a different number, which is probably higher with stricter conditions. And then after 5 years, it changes again. That's the challenge. And right. Also the manner in which some transactions are conducted. Investors were saying there's just significant value leakage. And so when it then comes to exploration, which is hugely uncertain and risky because you're still trying to find something, and you have those burdens imposed on you, it becomes discouraging. And then the third point is that there are many other options available around the world where people can invest their money. And that's what people did. And so that's one of the things that I think to this day we need to address, particularly right now where the search for critical minerals, the scramble for Africa, as it said, including South Africa, is significant.
Wow.
The global community, or the Western world, so to speak, has got significant concerns about security of supply of these critical minerals, because these are minerals that are required for the economic development which is driven by the need for renewable energy, as well as the need for technologies. And there's one location where these critical minerals are available in adequate quantities, maybe not all altogether sufficient. Africa is the place.
Yeah. It's going to be a massively important moment probably for the next century, like exactly what happens with those minerals and whether we're able to use them for developmental growth or go back to old patterns of exploitation and failing to really galvanize local development.
Well, and those are the debates that are currently taking place. You mentioned before we started that I was at the Future Minerals Forum in Saudi. Now, Saudi Arabia, in terms of the Future Minerals Forum, in my interpretation, have established a global platform for conversations and collaboration that they've referred to as the super region. And the super region is basically the Middle East as the connecting point between Africa, to the west, and then Asia to the east.
Very interesting. Okay.
And the conversations that are taking place are very interesting in terms of providing an understanding, firstly, on some of the drivers behind the potential demand and expected demand. And it's all around, economic growth, the need to transition to a low carbon future, the urgency to reduce emissions, and therefore critical minerals, which are also referred to as energy metals, because that's where they're going. They're going into making more solar panels, more wind farms. The uranium is going to be needed for nuclear.
Yeah.
So this is the new expression, critical minerals or energy metals, but also required for things like batteries, also energy. And so this is where we've seen. But then from the supplier side, which is now largely South Africa, from a Minerals Council perspective, we've come with an expression, well, there's also a concern from our side of security of demand. Because you can invest a lot of money in exploration and exploiting. But then you don't get the demand. And so how do we bridge this potential supply-demand risk?
Sure.
The second thing is that whilst we recognize the imperative for transitioning, everybody needs to transition, but we're all going to transition at different stages, given our current capabilities and shortcomings. Another important aspect for South Africa particularly and for the continent is there also needs to be an urgent attention paid to development.
Absolutely.
Because in my mind, it will be very difficult to see how we can transition effectively and efficiently without that base of development, which is a base that is already established for the West. And so the conversation then very quickly moves towards, things that you would have heard, such as beneficiation, value addition.
Absolutely.
And these are all very relevant because it's about making sure that you are maximizing the value that you get from those minerals.
Absolutely.
Rather than, what Africa has always done, which is dig up the raw materials and ship them. But to get to that point of beneficiating and value, we need a strategy. It's not something that you can wake up in the morning, maybe you bump your head and you think, beneficiation of our minerals.
It's a whole concerted
it
long-term.
needs a concerted medium to long-term strategy. And South Africa is already beneficiating significant amount of its minerals, and that's something that, unfortunately, given where we are, we're also beginning to slip away from our fingers.
Absolutely. I'm interested in a lot of things you said there. The first, just to go back to the regulatory environment, is it's quite interesting to hear that the issue is not, in principle, whether more Black South Africans need to benefit from the value chain of mining, but it's more a question of the certainty of the policy and it not shifting and changing. Because you often hear that, oh no, BEE is what's actually holding things back from certain sectors of the commentariat. But you're saying it's not necessarily that. It's rather
I don't believe it is.
The certainty of the policy.
It's a certainty of policy and integrity in the application of the policy.
Sure.
Because, we all like to label things. South Africa's label of the concept of localization, to look at it another way, is BEE, Black Economic Empowerment. How you ensure that people domestically benefit from this investment. China has the same. Many other countries have localization programs, and they actually make sense, as BEE does. But you also have to make sure that in the way that you apply them, you are consistent and transparent. Equally, making sure that there are other factors that are enabling. I think one of the flaws, perhaps, with BEE is that it has been left to be the end-all, be-all of economic growth and development. And so we have not seen the need for investment in infrastructure, which is affecting us all, BEE or not. And fortunately, we are addressing now some of the economic infrastructure like Transnet and Eskom. Need to focus on water, things like, because those are things that affect you irrespective of whether you localizing or not. Those are things that are fundamental to the economy functioning effectively. And this is where we need to come back to with policies that will ensure that we attract exploration in mining. Broadly speaking, it must be market-friendly policies such that the market can take on the risks that the market is designed to. Government may also play a role, in terms of, exploration. But I think given the need for scale, so the DMRE will speak of the 400 million rand exploration fund that it set up, which is great. It's a good start. You translate it to global terms in hard currency, that's $20 million.
Sure.
If we could get $1 billion, it's about 20 billion rands of exploration. We could turn this country, or the provinces where mining is located, will be littered with drilling drill rigs.
Okay.
And those provinces are Northern Cape, which is when I was having a conversation with the Premier of Northern Cape, I said to him, Northern Cape is the last frontier of mining. Northwest from a platinum and chrome perspective, Limpopo, diversity of commodities and minerals like platinum, vanadium, chrome, coal, Mpumalanga. We know Mpumalanga for coal, but it also has some gold, and it could also have several other resources like gas, for instance. So those are very important provinces for mining, and if you look at them, they all surround Gauteng, the economic center of the world. That's where that's the financial capital.
Sure.
In addition, I guess, to Cape Town. So I think a coherent strategy around the question you asked earlier, where we started with this conversation.
Yeah.
How do we? And we're having a conversation with the team today. How do we make mining foremost in the minds of very important decision makers here, such that by foremost we mean that it's an industry that needs to be promoted. It's an industry where, relative to others, it needs to be a clear decision why it would be put first and favored relative to another. Not necessarily always put first.
Sure.
Because other economic sectors have a role to play as well. Because the stimulus from mining is significant. And investment in developing a mine means that you immediately open up opportunities for steel, because you need lots of steel. You need lots of cement. So South African companies like PPC, what used to be ISCO is now ArcelorMittal.
Yeah, and we know they've been through a difficult period.
And they're going through a difficult period right now.
Yeah.
You then immediately stimulate smaller miners that are going to be mining quarries, limestone quarries, sand quarries, because in a concrete mix you need all of that.
Okay.
They need to employ people to be able to do that, and then there's services that are required to support those people, be it accommodation, food, and then you start stimulating agriculture. That's just one mine.
Yeah.
And then you scale that up to mines in different locations.
Sure.
And then not to talk about the infrastructure required to support that mine in terms of electricity, water, pipelines, transmission. So you get a whole lot of engineering that is now demanded. It's demand for skills. You now begin to absorb all of the graduates, training academies. And so this is the art of the possible in terms of, supporting mining. And we're not in any way saying that support mining to the neglect of other industries. It's just that given where we are, mining is an industry that is producing a product that the world requires.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't have to work too hard at finding a market for it.
And it's not like South Africa hasn't been able to think like this before, maybe in a previous era. And also, we can't neglect our inherent advantages as a country.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there are many countries around the world who would just love to have our wealth, and goodness knows how they would be able to harness it.
Yeah. And South Africa remains well developed across a number of dimensions. So when I look at South Africa's mining legislation, it's quite advanced.
Right.
Many other countries have copied it. Even our transformation legislation BEE.
Wow.
Has
Interesting.
has found its place in other countries that are seeing how do you make local economies inclusive. In the early days there was the Malaysian model that most people adopted. We also looked at that, and when the BEE Commission was established, and we developed our own. We've seen this being translated into other mining countries as well.
Interesting.
So other developments, in my 2023 integrated annual review, I speak of South Africa's Magnificent Seven. And this is a play on the S&P Magnificent Seven from a technology perspective.
Okay.
So I said, well, what are the things that are great about South Africa, the top 7 things? And without any bias, mining is first, of course.
By a long way. Yeah.
But in fact, even before that, because a functioning democracy.
Sure.
If you look at what was anticipated leading up to the elections and the outcome and where we are.
Yeah.
Compare that to other countries which have been going through elections, and you can choose out of the other 77 countries that have been going through elections around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that has provided a good context. Economies sectors such as mining, agriculture, and tourism.
Yeah.
So that's 4. And the other one that I talk about that I think is magnificent is the youth. We have a large and youthful population. That is pent-up energy just waiting to be released. And we need to harness that. And that youth dividend, as so often spoken about, is one that we cannot afford to go to waste.
Definitely.
And then we have well-developed capital markets through the JSE, the financial sector, the banking system. JSE, I think, still remains amongst the top 20 in the world, and amongst, if not the top in the continent. And then the skills within the finance sector. Yeah. And we spoke earlier about the engineering skills in South Africa that are supporting mining.
Absolutely. World class.
And then I think, the Constitution in terms of some of the legislation that is providing for a harmonious society. So we have very, very important elements that we need to leverage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And build this country for what it can be. And it's really about, and I think it's the kind of leadership conversations that are emerging.
Yeah.
In terms of leadership amongst government and business. From a Minerals Council perspective, we're starting leadership conversations between mining industry leadership and labor unions.
Yeah.
Because they have the same concerns we have.
Sure.
They and so this compact that the president has spoken about, I think by the time that happens, what I'm hoping for is that from a mining industry perspective, we would have had our industry compact conversation, out of which we then take some key issues to the national agenda in terms of what the role of the industry, the mining industry is in the economy, and what the potential and the capability of the industry is. And I think also be very specific about what we expect from government to really enable this industry to function effectively.
You mentioned labor, and that's another question around the industry. We know we come from a history of great exploitation in South Africa, and even in democracy, there have been those tragic moments, the Mariganas. Stilfontein now is a different dimension because it's got this kind of unregulated mining going on as well. But there is a sense in which we as a country haven't found a way to get all the stakeholders singing in harmony. How do we bring in mine workers, mining communities in a way that they feel they are also benefiting from the wealth of this industry?
So, let me start off by saying we don't deny the legacies of mining. the negative legacies, some positive legacies. We spoke about the city of gold. And, and there's some legacies that we're dealing with on the health side, of which we've made good progress, and we're working with the Department of Health around that. And I think with the passage of time, we've also come to a point where we understand how to deal with some of the remaining, real or perceived. And it usually comes up, for instance, I'll start on the other side in terms of community and community benefit. Where, in fact, in as far as mining's contribution to communities, it's been significant and it's grown. And I think it perhaps would have started with the fact that we had a mining charter. And so it brought focus to how miners can invest in communities. But there are a couple of learning points around that, lessons learned. That the manner in which communities benefit from mining is not only and merely from what mining does. It is a function of the contribution of mining in a functioning context of local government. Because what we found is that where mining invests in communities, and it has invested significantly, but in a dysfunctional context, that investment dissipates very quickly. Because you take, for instance, a mining company, of which there have been many, that will build a TVET college or a clinic or even a community hall. It then has to hand it over to an entity that has the jurisdiction and the capability to run that infrastructure. So if you hand over a school or some community infrastructure to a government that doesn't have the capability, that infrastructure eventually withers away and it doesn't provide the service that community expects. And what then happens is that the mine then gets blamed for not delivering. I mean, I've been in a situation in my previous employment where we were engaging communities about, and it was a stakeholder engagement led by the board. And this was Exara. And the most surprising thing is that we had officials of local government sitting on the other side of the table making demands on us in terms of what we need to do, which I found very strange. But that's not the case everywhere.
Sure.
And before I move on to that, from a labor perspective, I think relationships with labor have evolved and have become much more constructive and much more positive. Obviously, there's been a shift from, bargaining at an industry level to bargaining at a company level. That has been one of the big contributing factors to positive changes in labor relations, I think, as far as I'm concerned. The industry has become a lot more stable from an industrial relations perspective. The relationship between companies and regional unions are much more positive, much more interactive. And I think the conversations are not merely about just wages. They're actually more about the well-being of employees. And so when I was with Royal Bafokeng Platinum, it was one of the first organizations that concluded a wage agreement of more than 1 year. I think it started off with 2 years or 3 years. Now we're seeing wage agreements of 5 years. So if you want to read something into that, is that the relationships have now evolved to a point where there's now a common vision, a more longer term outlook to the business rather than just short term, year by year. And that's positive. And I think this is what's giving rise to my confidence that we're now having these conversations about a social compact, so to speak, or in fact, I prefer to call it a leadership compact around the socioeconomic impact of mining. That's the conversation. I think this is how the relationships with labor are evolving, and we need to take that to government. We need to take that to community. And I think where there's still some challenges around delivering on a sustainable basis in community, and by sustainable, it's really in a way that ensures that once mining is completed, there continues to be livelihoods, and what kind of livelihoods. So I think that's perhaps how I would like to challenge ourselves as a mining industry in terms of sustainable impact on mining. It's beyond today whilst we're operating, but it's sustainable from the definition and the perspective of the community, not from a perspective of mining.
Absolutely.
And to be able to achieve that, what we are seeing is that it's not something we can do by ourselves. And so, once again, this famous word collaboration. And we're spending a lot of time with the team in the Minerals Council really understanding what collaboration is about. It's not merely you and I getting together and say, we're going to do this shop and we're fine. It's going to be, okay, what do we want to do and why? What do you bring into the party? What are you capable of? How do the two things or the three things, depending on how many people are coming into that collaboration, that need to be put together? And do they make sense towards achieving that outcome? And I think more importantly, what is the scale at which we're going to do this? And why scale is important is because the scale of the challenges is also that much bigger. And so what you then have to come up with in terms of that social impact has to be at such a scale that it needs to change the lives of thousands of people. If not hundreds of thousands of people, where it could be initially a couple of thousand, but then the catalytic effect of that. And I love the word catalytic effect because that's what mining does. And so in everything that we do, it needs to have a catalytic effect in order to be able to achieve the scale that we want. And that's kind of where what I'm seeing emerging and where we're evolving towards in terms of the question you asked around how we benefit communities better.
To come back to where we started with the unregulated mining, not just in terms of Stilfontein, but in terms of the wider industry, how worried are you about that growing and evolving into a much bigger underground economy, as it were, and what can be done to avoid a completely dysregulated shadow mining sector from emerging?
Well, I think we have to look at it from a much bigger picture than that in terms of it. We speak of Stilfontein and legal mining because that's how it has manifested. That's how, I guess, where there's not been sufficient implementation of the law. And not only mining law, but broadly speaking, the law. We've seen this manifestation of illegal mining. The issue for me is about how we don't tighten up on the rule of law, on the application of legislation in various sectors, that we end up having a second economy. Because then what happens is that a lot more people will lose out, and you'll have a lot more people finding themselves in similar or worse conditions than what we saw and witnessed with the illegal mining conditions in Stilfontein. So this is the reason why, one of the three crisis committees, we had the NECOM, which was looking at how we address ESCOM. We've got lights today without any nervousness that they will go off, right? Because load shedding for more than 300 days.
And it turns out it wasn't as impossible as everyone was saying.
Exactly. And why? Because we're able to come together, business and government and ESCOM, to address the issues. And the issue wasn't so much about ESCOM, it was about energy security. Obviously with ESCOM being at the center because they play such an important role, and they've looked at other things like renewables and so on. Then there's the National Logistics Crisis Committee about logistics in the country, not just Transnet. And hence we've seen the kind of reforms coming through in terms of private sector participation and so on. And then the third crisis was around crime and corruption. And I think this speaks particularly to your point that, with crime and corruption, this is where you begin to see the emergence and presence of a second economy. In terms of legislative structures economic structures, social strucures, which are siphoning from a legitimate economy and a legitimate society. And so it's not an economy that's there for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah.
And so this is why it's absolutely critical that we address the issue of crime and corruption. And I think it's also within that context that we've been seeing this response as well to illegal mining. I mean, today the Minister of DMRE quoted that about 60 billion rand is being extracted illegally.
Wow, 60 billion
from as a result of illegal mining.
Is that in South Africa?
In South Africa, yeah. And then, unfortunately, there's a lot of that also prevails in the rest of the continent. So if you read World Bank and IMF reports about some of the illicit trading, it's a huge amount of money that is being lost.
60 billion a year.
Well, I think for 2024, that's what the number was.
That's blown my mind, actually. So if we could get a handle on that, like the fiscus could potentially benefit hugely. Hugely, yeah. The mining Indaba is obviously coming up soon, and this is a way that South Africa has really positioned itself at the center of the global economic conversation on mining. The world comes to South Africa, the world's mining companies and mining interests. What are your hopes for this year's mining Indaba, and what role will the Mineral Council be playing in the Indaba?
So the theme, hope I can remember it, is something in the words in the form of future-proofing Africa's mining today. And so it's a very interesting topic, because if you just interrogate some of those expressions, future-proofing.
Yeah.
It's really forward-looking, ensuring endurance, long-term longevity of the industry, in the context of the African continent, and obviously with the mining Indaba being in South Africa, South Africa as well. And when we were talking about the topic, it was also important to make sure that we bring in the people element, that it's not merely about the minerals. And so future-proofing Africa's mining is also about recognizing the people, the culture. And one of the suggestions I made was what we should combine with the mining Indaba is that cultural element, such that, because it's a huge business tourism opportunity.
Absolutely.
And so it's an opportunity to showcase Africa's culture, in a way that most people would not have the opportunity to experience it. Because going to each one of these countries, which have come to the mining Indaba for mining, to try and experience something different about them, will be expensive. So you kind of bring it all together one. So, and that is also another aspect that should be another aspect of attraction for Africa. It's not just a mere scramble for the minerals, but it's about recognizing the people who live here. And then mining per se, it's a continent that has huge mineral endowment, huge mineral wealth. But that wealth is beneath the earth. It's a wealth which we need to surface and let the people get the most benefit out of. And so it's about how mining, once again, can be that catalyst for economic development. And I think given that what is implied in this age of energy, metals, and critical minerals, is how mining in Africa will actually enable this transition for the world, not just for Africa. It will first and foremost enable the development of Africa, and it will secondly, and alongside that, enable the transition of Africa and the world into a new future. But how are we thinking about that today? How are we doing that future-proofing today? And it comes back to what we've spoken about, the leadership conversations, the leadership compact, the long-term thinking, the planning, the resourcing, the collaboration. it's going to need leadership. And so it's going to make for an exciting conference. And I was just studying the program. It's quite an extensive program with several tracks, from the ministerial and presidential address, which most people look forward to. There'll be a almost of a setting of an agenda from that context of the politicians speaking, but also from the big major companies, who have a wide footprint around the world in terms of what's happening in the mining sector. What are the key drivers?
Yeah.
What is required to provide for investment in mining? And there'll also be those who will be talking from a junior mining perspective in terms of their challenges and opportunities and what they're seeing. Topics around sustainability are now embedded within, the main program of the mining Indaba. And those topics are also quite varied. I'm going to be on a panel talking about leadership. Are we leading? How are we leading to future-proof Africa's mining? So the very topic and the theme, to the role of women and youth. So Thursday, the last day, will be dedicated to youth leadership in mining. So there's a whole plethora and spectrum of topics that we're going to be talking about. And the Minerals Council's role is going to be really positioning the South African mining industry in these conversations. On the Monday, we're going to be launching our Facts and Figures, which is really about looking back to 2024 and how the mining industry has performed, how it has delivered, where were its shortcomings, where are the challenges, and where are the opportunities. And then we'll also, the second day, talk about safety and health performance. The minister announced today that the industry actually achieved yet another record in terms of the number of fatalities. And so we're on a journey, absolutely encouraging. We're on a journey to zero harm. We're getting closer and closer to that, and making sure that everyone who goes, who works in the mine, goes back home. That's the vision, and both from a physical safety perspective, but also from a health. So there's still some areas of concern, for instance, when it comes to exposure to which affects lung health, and that's a sensitive area that it has a long-term impact on the health of employees. So we're giving a lot of attention, but also noise exposure is important.
Interesting. Okay.
And so those are areas that we're giving attention to. So we've seen some good successes in terms of both health, particularly when we look at where the mining industry is performing in terms of TB. The benchmark is the national average, and we are well below that national average in terms of TB. So we're quite chuffed with that. And then on the third day, we're planning on really just having a conversation, reflecting on this performance that I've referred to, in terms of how can we do better? What is it that we need as a South African mining industry to achieve, no longer aspiring, but to achieve our potential and ambition? And this is where we'll be having a session that we're going to call What Miners Want. And it's really three things. And we've spoken about a lot of them. The context within which you operate, which is around, the political environment. We've seen how the democracy has delivered a political environment that we're all confident to and we're all hopeful from. The second thing are some of the enabling factors that will make mining work, and it's really infrastructure related. Energy, logistics, water. Telecoms is becoming an important issue as we talk about technology and innovation in mining. And then the third element is policy and legislation. And this is where I think there's still some work that we can do together, not only with the DMRE, but it's also with all the other departments that are important to mining. Water and sanitation in terms of water use license. Department of Fisheries, Fisheries, Forestry and Environment in terms of environmental permits. So all of this these legislative bodies need to work together. And as I said earlier, to make mining foremost. And so this is what we want to be talking about when we talk of what miners want.
Well, Mr. Mthenjane, it's been a great honor to have you on the show. All the best for the Indaba, and thanks for sharing your experiences and insights with us on SMWX.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the interview.
It's been fun. Thank you. Like, share, subscribe. Help us get to that next milestone of 200,000 subscribers as soon as we can. And keep it locked on SMWX. Aye.